And to keep an eye on things. As you know, we had a pretty serious flash flood, life-threatening flash flood in the Burn Scar yesterday, 2.5 inches of rain and about an hour and a half, and then it continued. So just so far everything's held, but certainly a dicey couple of days and it's still raining. So just keep an eye on things. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. I'll call this meeting to order. Are we recording?
Yes, we are.
Okay. Good morning. Good morning, everyone. I'll call this meeting to order of the Legislative Committee of the Colorado Forest Health Council. Let's take a roll call. Oh, and I'm Chair Commissioner Jody Shadwick now.
Okay, I'll go down the roll. Samantha Albert. Oh, I see you, Samantha. Yeah. Christy Belton.
I'm here. Morning.
Morning. Pat Dorsey. Director Matt McCombs. Katie McGrath Novak. Commissioner Jody Shadwick McNally.
Here.
Mark Morgan.
Here.
Julie Stencil.
Here.
And Selman White Skunk.
Here.
Great. So we have met quorum.
Thank you so much, Courtney. Let's just move on quickly to I think we're approving 5:21 and 5:05 minutes, approval of the minutes. Did anyone have any adjustments or anything they like to change or add? If not, I would welcome a motion. I think we can go ahead and do a motion to approve both sets of minutes in the same motion. Would anyone make that motion?
Yeah, I would move to approve the April 21st and May 5th meeting minutes.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you so much. Any further discussion? If not, all those in favor, say aye and aye.
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 Great. Let's move on. We have a lot on the agenda today, so we're going to crank through it and appreciate, again, everyone being here. We can talk about the tour and stuff after this presentation. I'm very thrilled. This is something that was an interest of mine, and I'm really grateful to Angela and Courtney for asking this presenter to come. And so we will have a presentation on vapor pressure deficit for forests and wildfires by Becky Bollinger from the Colorado Climate Center. And I hope, Becky, I have pronounced your name right. I always have this fear of mispronouncing people's names, and I think I'd psych myself out and do it anyway. So, so I hope I pronounced your name right. But we will. I know you have to get rolling. We thought we'd get going right away because I know you have a lot on your schedule today. So thank you for being here today. And if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself, that would be great. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me. And it's Becky Bollinger, but it is incredibly common, so don't feel bad about that. I am the assistant state climatologist with the Colorado Climate Center, which is at Colorado State University. And we are primarily monitoring the climate of Colorado, observed changes, potential future changes, placing extremes in historical perspective, things of that nature. And so talking about vapor pressure deficit is something that is becoming increasingly important to understand in Colorado. And so I was asked on Wednesday, so I have not put together a official presentation. So I'm just going to kind of share some resources and hope that they help. And I was wondering if it's okay if I can share my screen.
Yes, that's fine. Let me know if you seem to have trouble with the permissions, Becky.
Okay. Oh, see, I've never done it in Google Meet, which means it's going to make me start over, I think. I'm going to see if it will let me do it without like leaving and coming back in.
Thank you, Pat. Dorsey, if you have a question, Pat, while you're just listening in and you want to just type it in the chat, I'll be monitoring. So you won't need to worry about raising your hand. Just put it in the chat. I'll keep an eye on it.
Oh, I can't share my screen. So I will be sharing links then and going over things. But there is current monitoring on vapor pressure deficit. And in case anyone is interested, I'm going to put it here in the chat box. And what is vapor pressure deficit? It's a kind of really abstract concept that most simply means we're talking about how much water the atmosphere wants to take from the ground. So vapor pressure deficit is looking at the differences in pressure between saturated air and the air that we actually have. So in Colorado, we know that we're a bit of a drier climate, right? We don't get high humidities. It's one of the things that makes a more pleasant place to live in the summer, I believe. But it does mean that the atmosphere is going to try to take more water from the surface. And so what vapor pressure deficit is it tells you this is how much humidity you have in the atmosphere. That's what the pressure is. This is how much the pressure would be if you had 100% humidity, and what's the difference between those. And so we have a normal vapor pressure deficit. That means we're not always saturated. This week, not a good example of that, but we have what's typical, and our vapor pressure deficit would be higher than places like, Texas and Florida. But it's normal and it's typical for us. And so what the problem becomes is when you have anomalies, what is not normal and what is not typical. And that is because the entire environment around us has become accustomed to what the vapor pressure deficit should normally be. And so our Colorado mountain forests have grown in that environment, and that's the environment that they're accustomed to. So when you warm the atmosphere, your atmosphere can now hold more water vapor. We use the term hold because it's not like the atmosphere holds anything, but you can add more water vapor to a warmer atmosphere. But that doesn't necessarily mean that we have that moisture to add. And so what that does is it increases our vapor pressure deficit. Okay, so you have the same amount of moisture, but you've warmed the air. So you've increased that deficit, even though you have the same amount of moisture. And so what that does is it means you're going to put more stress on the vegetation that is used to what the vapor pressure deficit has been all along. And that is going to result in some issues. And what I really wanted to share my screen with you for is this report that came out from NOAA.
Will you try sharing it again?
If maybe my screen says I'm not allowed to share. I have to go into system settings, I think. And so I don't know if somebody wants to bring up this report and share the screen, and then I can go over it.
I can do that.
This report is on the drought that we have most recently experienced in 2020 and 2021. There's a nice description of vapor pressure deficit. And then let's see if you're able to get that up. Perfect. If you can scroll down to page 15.
Yes.
Perfect. So this is one that I wanted to show of particular interest because 2020 was such a notable year for many reasons, specifically for Colorado and a lot of other Western states. we had a really terrible wildfire year in 2020. So these are pretty complicated graphs, but they really tell a good story. And so that is why I wanted to share. So I'm going to go over it slowly and hope that it makes sense. But what we're looking at is the relationship between precipitation anomalies and vapor pressure deficit anomalies. And so typically when you are drier than average precipitation talking and you're in drought, that is generally related to higher vapor pressure deficits. And so that's why you'll see the relationship with the slope looking like this, where your higher vapor pressure deficits are with negative precipitation anomalies and your lower vapor pressure deficits are with your higher precipitation anomalies. So the left is for annual, and then the right extends it out into decadal values. So if we look at the blue section, the blues are for 1950 to 2000, and they've taken an average for all of the Southwest United States, and the dot is for what the precipitation anomaly was and the vapor pressure deficit anomaly. Then the next period is 2010 to 2030. So this is going to include some observations and some modeled data from one of our global climate models. And then there's the future scenarios of 2030 to 2050 in that pinkish color. And so what we get is we can see because of warming temperatures that we're just upticking that those dots for each of those decades. You can see that they're getting higher, which is higher vapor pressure deficit. So we can still have negative precipitation anomalies, positive precipitation anomalies, but overall our vapor pressure deficits are getting higher, i.e. our air is getting drier. So the example here that we're going to look at is 2020. And you can see the dot on that left plot. 2020 is way out beyond all the other dots. It's the driest dot for precipitation, and it's also the highest dot for vapor pressure deficit. And so we have some statistics in the lower left-hand corner that say, what is the likelihood that we could get a drier dot than 2020? So a bigger precipitation deficit than 2020. And so you can see there's a 2.7% in the future scenario, 1.7% in the current scenario, 2% in the historical. And so that means that's a low probability of getting precipitation drier than 2020. It's pretty even across the board in history or in the future that you would get that dry. In the upper right-hand corner is the probability that you could get a higher vapor pressure deficit than 2020. So if we look at the 1950 to 2000, it was impossible. You could not get a vapor pressure deficit that high. In our current scenario, a very, very, very small likelihood. So it was incredibly unlikely to get the vapor pressure deficit that we saw in 2020. But obviously we saw it, so it did happen. That likelihood increases to 11.7% in the future scenario. So while we have the same likelihood of the dry precipitation anomaly, we have a much higher likelihood of the higher vapor pressure deficit in future scenarios. And you see the same thing when you look at the stats with the decadal means. In fact, the future vapor pressure deficit for a period like 2011 to 2020 is 58% likely. And so basically what we know is we've got, even with no changes in precipitation, we're going to be looking at similar precipitation patterns that we've seen in the past, but we're going to have these higher vapor pressure deficit anomalies. And what we know from 2020 is that that was one of the factors in partially driving the drought, a response from the drought, and resulted in basically very dry timber that was able to feed these fires that grew so quickly. And so that is probably one of the biggest take homes. I really encourage you all to look through this. But basically, that take home message is that we don't know what's going to happen with precipitation, but we do know that our air is likely to get drier simply because our temperatures are getting warmer. We're not adding more moisture to the atmosphere, but we are heating the atmosphere. Therefore, it's getting drier. And that is going to mean that we will have years that will be more likely like 2020. One other study I wanted to share, and you don't need to share your screen on this one, or you don't need to share the info on this one, but it's for anybody of interest. It kind of talks about the sensitivity of forests to vapor pressure deficit. And I was hoping to find one specific to Colorado, but I haven't yet. I can send that on when I find it. But this was an interesting study that compared what if you decrease precipitation versus increase vapor pressure deficit, how does that change your forests? And so they used a model that looked like at a big Douglas fir forest in the Cascades. And when they increased vapor pressure deficit, it reduced the productivity of the forest. So they found that it didn't increase transpiration. So that's the amount of water that the plants evaporate into the atmosphere. I like to call it plant sweat. It didn't increase that, but precipitation deficits would decrease transpiration. Obviously, if they don't get the moisture, they can't transpire. Or if they do get the moisture, they transpire more. But vapor pressure deficit wasn't really going to change transpiration, which means that if the plants had some water in, they're going to try to hold it. But it did reduce the productivity of the forest, which meant it was probably putting all of its energy into saving the water that it had. And that meant that it couldn't produce as much, and so essentially it means it's not as healthy of an environment for those forests. So when you combine in a drought situation of decreased precipitation and increased VPD, which is something that is basically going to go hand in hand in our Colorado forests, not only are you going to be taking more water out of the forests with the decreased precipitation, you're also going to be reducing the productivity and the health of those forests. And so I think that is something that is going to be of concern, that our forests are highly sensitive to changes in VPD. That's all that I was going to talk about, and see if there are follow-up questions or anything. I threw a lot of information and a pretty complicated graphic. So if you have any follow-up questions, I'd love to be able to answer them for you.
Yeah, that was a lot of information. It's just like at the Colorado Wildfire Conference, my head's spinning like, oh man. Anybody have any other questions and any things for our wonderful speaker, Mr. Morgan?
You're muted.
You're muted, Mr.
You're
Morgan.
muted.
If I'm understanding your presentation and your graphs right, you have your three essentially different, I don't know what you want to call them, scales, graphs, overlays, but one of them is historical, one is half historical and half projection, and the other one is projection. Is that correct?
Yeah.
That's what I thought I was looking at. And so I had several questions for you. In your looking at your research, one of the most common indicators of a climate change over a long period of time, forests grow in what we call rotations. So one life cycle of a forest, like lodgepole, is commonly 110 years. So that's one rotation. All right. So our current climate conditions here in Colorado, give or take, have been about 400 rotations for our lodgepole pine forest, say. So before that, we had a major climate change. Things have had their ups and downs, but they've been pretty steady between now and then. So essentially, you can go back to the last ice age, 400 rotations. So many of our different forests had different number of rotations, but it's pretty easy to track the number of rotations. So have you overlaid the rotation history, because then you're working with history with your modeling for the weather historically, because I think you could get an accurate prediction going that way. You see what I'm suggesting?
Yeah.
You looked at one research on the coast for Douglas fir, but there should be pretty good data for rotations, and that should accurately predict or overlay your climate ones to see if the negative vapor pressure was a true prediction over the long term. Because I guess what I'm curious about right now, you've got half historical data and half projection data. And I don't want to be negative in any way, but when I was at CSU and taking weather classes a long time ago, and we were told that we were looking down the gun barrel at climate at winter. We're going to have another ice age, and so things tend to change here. And I guess I'm wondering what they were predicting back then too, and they didn't predict too good. So I guess what I'm asking here is that what have we done to get better at the predicting as far as they relate to our forests? Can we go back and look historically at what actually happened? Is anybody doing that? Is there any data available?
I am sure that there is. I will immediately admit that I am not very familiar with forest data and that side of things. And so I can't really answer what people are doing in that realm, although I am sure that there are. And I think that that's a great idea to be able to combine those climate factors like VPD with the rotation data that you're referring to. So if I were doing that type of research, that would definitely be something I would do. And that might be something I'll reach out to some of these researchers on. This project that I shared was not me, but to say that is something that would be incredibly useful. And obviously, when we can combine multiple data sets and really see how they're connected, I think that's going to be the way to get some of those answers. Your other question in terms of, are we getting better at predictability? I would say that yes, we are. Perhaps I'm biased, but I do think we're getting better at predictability. We have seen, we've been looking specifically for Colorado, but I know that others have been looking at other regions and globally. How are we doing compared to what the climate models have predicted for the early part of the 21st century? Because now we've got these climate models that were predicting basically from 2006 on And now we've had, about 14 years since then. My math is not good. It's my Friday morning brain. But we've had quite a few years since 2006 to be able to say, how have the climate models been doing? And they're tracking relatively well with what our observations have shown over the last 15 years. And so we've actually been able to say, we're tracking pretty close with those mid-level climate change scenarios. We know with the changes we've made, it's unlikely that we'll be in those worst case scenarios. So we are learning what scenarios may be better to fit with. And so that I'm having more confidence in those. I understand the trepidation of, looking at a one time period that includes both past data and future data. And I'm not really sure why they did that. It would be a good question to ask. But I think that we have a lot of confidence in the temperature changes that we are seeing right now. And we know that we're getting warmer and that we will continue to get warmer. And so I think regardless of precipitation changes, we can expect those higher vapor pressure deficits. So I think your suggestion of taking that data and looking at it in the past and seeing how it compares with forest data, and then coming up with some new ideas, hypotheses there would be good.
I have the other half of my question, I guess, is that your vapor pressure number, you mentioned that here in Colorado, we had essentially 3, but 2 really large variations in our health of our forest. Primarily, we had an unprecedented mountain pine beetle outbreak that was truly unprecedented in North America that we can find historically. And we had a spruce budworm or spruce defoliant outbreak. And so what I'm wondering here is a chicken or egg kind of deal with the lack of the forest. And you were mentioning transpiring water. I mean, the simple take home there is if they haven't got the water, they're not transpiring it. If they're transpiring it, they would increase the number that you're talking about. And you said on the coast, it didn't make any difference. But we had a huge vegetative event in Colorado and even down into the more deserty areas of the state in pinyon juniper timber types. So we had a huge change in what those trees were doing. Would that change your numbers? And I guess I'm real curious about how that overlays, or, did they change the numbers, or did the numbers, how did that event affect what you would be recording?
Yeah. Good questions that I don't have the answers to. And I think that's one of the important things, is to be able to find some Colorado specific studies.
So in the interest of time, I think you have some fantastic questions, Mr. Morgan. Let's put that in the parking lot and see if we can find some more data to answer that. We have about 3 other people that want to have their questions raised. We have another, but no, I think these are great discussions. That's I think we all were interested in the subject. So I'm going to go in order of who raised their hand first. Pat, you were first.
Yeah, thank you. It was a fabulous presentation, and there's a lot of information there that all seems to make sense. Have you found any additional information that talks about how reducing stand densities might help with the vapor deficit, vapor pressure deficit?
This is definitely getting out of my realm. I don't know about stem densities.
So let's put this another question for the parking lot and see if we have our DNR staff can answer some of help us find some answers for that. So obviously this topic is huge topic, but I wanted us to kind of dig in a little deeper for those that weren't at the Wildfire Council. Maybe we can also find if that was recorded, Courtney, maybe we can send that presentation from, I don't know, that'd be great too to send that. So We won't put Becky on but I think that's a great question, Pat. Let us put that in the parking lot and see if we can find some other folks to answer that for us. Would that be okay?
Yes, that's fine.
Great.
I'm so sorry.
Um,
Now I'm desperately wishing I knew more about some density and rotations.
Yeah.
And
And that might be Director McCombs might have some of these answers too, since he had to leave a little early. So Christy, you're up next.
Thank you. And thank you, Becky. Sorry to put you on the spot. I have a little bit, my question is same vein as Mark Morgan. I'm wondering, how were you guys able to isolate just this VPD data, or were you able to isolate it at all and come up with the numbers? Because like Mark said, we had these large vegetative events, but then I'm even thinking about, over the last, many, many decades, 50, 60 years, where, we have not been able to we have not allowed our forests to burn. And so, chicken and egg thing, is that more of an impact on forest health than this VPD? So that's more of my question. And again, if we need to table all of that, I'm fine. Thank you.
I mean, I think that my answer would be, rather than chicken and egg that one is causing there, I think that they're all having an impact in some sort of sense, and then trying to parse out which is having a greater impact. That might be the true question. But I do think that, regardless of what's happening in the forests, vapor pressure deficit, it's going to have, it's going to be somewhat independent, right? There's going to be some dependence to, if you have a healthy forest that's transpiring more into the air, you're going to be able to decrease that VPD. But there are some independent variables to VPD that are not controlled by the forest, but by, our geography, our distance from large bodies of water like the ocean. And so I think that it's a great idea to look into more what are the relative contributions to each of those, because I think my initial thought was, how is it changing from the large scale atmospheric perspective? And it's great to know that I need to remind myself that it's also going to be partially contributed to by variability in the forest level.
Great question. Let's write that one down too. We might want to explore that as well. Katie, you're up next.
Awesome. Hi, Becky. It's good to see you.
Hello.
So this might be getting ahead of the game a little bit, and I don't know if it's outside of your wheelhouse, but you've laid out a big challenge here and something that's going to change forests a lot. But I'm wondering what policy can do about this issue. Is there things that other states have been doing that you would say are successful? Is our role to fund more studies so that we understand what's happening in Colorado more? Just curious if you have any suggestions or ideas or examples.
Yeah, that is a really good question. I don't have the answers to all that, but I can say that obviously funding for future studies to whomever can do them is going to be hugely beneficial. And I think, how do you mitigate the impacts of vapor pressure deficit? I'm not really sure. But in terms of forest management, obviously it seems that we're learning a lot about better ways to manage forests and be able to somewhat mitigate, some of the impacts on that end. And if we're going to look to examples, my anecdotal thoughts are that we need to look to California because I feel like they're about 5 to 10 years ahead of us in terms of how they have experienced impacts to changes in precipitation and wildfires and high VPD days and things quickly evolving and getting out of control. And, you know, they've been emergency response, but trying to now get ahead of it into, you know, can we plan better to not always be on the emergency response side of things. And so I think that would be the best example of somewhere to look for research that's been going on, because I think California has a lot of research. But, you know, then that's the challenge, similar to the Cascade Mountains research effort, is that it's a different climate too. There's going to be some similarities, but there's going to be certain differences, and ultimately, not only do we have differences in climate, but we have differences in land cover and forest type. And so I feel like I'm not answering any questions, but they are
No,
all
you're
very
fine. I
consistent.
think you're helping us spark. I think you're helping us spark a good conversation. And Katie, thank you for being here today from the Forest Health Council. This was a question I had as well, because I brought up this topic that I wanted to explore a little different, because I think it's something overall that we need to increase our knowledge about as Forest Health Council members. But I also was thinking, how does this inform our decision making, and do we need more information? And I think that's the question I have for DNR and for everyone, is what do we have for Colorado that helps us understand where this is at and where we need to go? And is it something we need to have a little more in-depth research or look at? And I don't know, maybe someone's already done this. I don't want to create the wheel, but something that we can explore. So Julie, you have your hand up. Thank you.
Thank you. And first, Becky, thank you for your time and the information today. This was fascinating. And like Commissioner Shattuck McNally, I think my head is going, what? It really drove two questions for me, which I'm not expecting you to have the answers to, but I think it's helpful for this group and even the larger council to understand how does this information that you're sharing. I see two big questions that I have, which are, how does the high deficit day, if you will, like if we're experiencing a period of time where we know we are in high deficit day, how does that impact the behaviors that need to happen on the ground, right? So not unlike a red flag warning day, is this high deficit information a piece of what helps define a red flag warning day? I guess that's a question I have, right? Because that all impacts sort of forest health and risk of fire, et cetera. And then I think the other question that I had was, you know, how do we take the information from the vapor pressure deficit to inform next steps on forest health, right? So if we know this is happening with the vapor pressure and the deficits, what does that mean for forest health? Does it, you know, when taken in combination with what Mr. Morgan said about cycles and turnover, et cetera, you know, are there steps that we can encourage or be thinking about to change the health of our forest, knowing what we know about vapor pressure deficit, and what are the other factors to look at? So I think this has just been really helpful to get the wheels turning on what else don't we know, and how do we use that as a group to make some informed decisions and recommendations, which is what, you know, in large part we're tasked with doing. So thank you. It's been really helpful.
No, you said it so much better than I did, Julie. That's exactly why I asked, you know, for this to be a topic today, because I do think it needs to be informing some of our decisions. If we can somehow find and ask the Colorado Wildfire Conference to let us have that presentation from the U.S. Forest Service, we all sat there stunned. And so I think it's something that would help. If we can even send it out for everyone to watch, it would be, I think, really helpful for you all and drive some more conversations. And Becky, we apologize if we've asked questions kind of out of your wheelhouse, but I really appreciate your time today. Let's have one more question, and then we probably need to move on through our agenda. And we can always put this back on as a continuation topic, and see what other information we can give. And you guys might have some homework to do some reading. So, but Mr. Morgan.
I just wanted to say, Becky, that I wasn't picking on you. I really appreciate it. You piqued my interest, and if you hadn't, then I would be pretty quiet otherwise. But I think the thing here is that the beauty of your presentation was that you did not have an agenda for how we should manage our forests. It was an unbiased presentation of what you know about, and that was just fine. And I appreciate that, because that makes it, you know, so many times you get into situations where somebody's presenting evidence, but they're actually presenting an agenda. And I really appreciate what you did. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that feedback. And similarly, you all have piqued my interest in that. I admit I only have knowledge that sits in that realm of climate, and this is one of those great examples where interdisciplinary is a scary word, but where we need to kind of work. You know, I need to come out of my climate bubble and get some people out of that forest health bubble, and, you know, kind of put our data together and do the research together. And so I think there are some great ideas here for some future efforts, and looking into this and starting to see, find out what the data shows us there.
Great. I think this has been a fantastic discussion and exactly what I hoped for us to have this topic. So I appreciate everyone asking such great questions. Samantha put in the chat that she was also thinking about the social license component here. I agree, because a lot of folks, this is a really complex topic, but for the public to understand, our forests are changing, their health is changing, and that means conditions are changing. And so it's not like when we grew up and yeah, so I think this is great. Becky, we'll let you get back onto your day. And I just want to just say thank you so much for coming today. And we hope to connect with you again soon on some more topics up in Fort Collins. So thank you.
Yeah, sounds awesome. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you, Becky.
Thank you, Becky.
Thank you, Becky.
Bye.
Okay, so next is our just really quick debrief, because I want to honor everyone's time. So I'm just going to go around the room and do rapid fire, and I'm going to just go on the screen to give everybody a chance to give their feedback. So James, we're going to let you go first because you're at the top left-hand part of my screen. What was your top two good or bad things about the last week's Forest Health Council and tour?
I only got good things. I appreciated you guys letting me kind of listen in. I connected with, excuse me, bad thing, rain, but we can't control that. Excuse me. But like actually getting to understand what we do as like kind of forest health, actually seeing the projects is helping me kind of understand my job better. So I just wanted to say thanks for letting me join that tour and for kind of engaging in a discussion to see what this group wants to do moving forward into next legislative session. So I appreciate that you guys let me kind of listen in, and look forward to kind of learning about this vapor pressure deficit and seeing if there's something we can do from a legislative standpoint. I thought that was a really great question, Katie. So I'm interested to see kind of what we can do to dig into it. So thanks.
Thank you, James. Mr. Morgan, and thank you for bringing your beautiful daughter for us to meet.
Thank you. I was really stressed about that whole thing myself, because the planets were in alignment, and I just had 3 things that I had to do that day, and I felt really bad about missing the last half of it, but I really didn't have a choice on any of them. And it was great to meet people in person and to see folks, and I think that's always positive if you can do that. So I would say it was positive. The only negatives were that I couldn't be in 3 places at once, and so I probably did a crappy job at 3 things. But I appreciate everybody understanding that. I had to be down in Alamosa afterwards, and it was excellent to meet people in person. I always prefer that. Thank you.
Well, now you understand how most of my week goes, because it drives me nuts. I want to be everywhere and learning all these things. So thanks, Mr. Morgan. Okay, Courtney, do you have anything you wanted to add?
I just want to say thanks so much for everyone who was able to come and for all the partners that helped coordinate the tour and it was really impressive, and I appreciated the support from every angle.
Thank you, Courtney. Julie?
Much like Mr. Morgan, the stars didn't align for me that day. My plan initially was to be there for all the things, and life had other things. So for those of you I got to meet in person, that was fantastic. I really enjoyed it. My hope is that on a going forward, we have even more opportunities, for that in person. I just think it's so important. So thank you, Commissioner, to you for organizing and hosting and all that. I thought that was really fantastic. And I'm just sorry that I couldn't be in person for more, but I thought it was a good meeting, and I look forward to the next in-person opportunity. I think I froze her.
Great. Well, and everyone can read Samantha's comments in the chat. Thank you, Samantha, for that feedback. Christy?
Thank you again for organizing. I thought it was just outstanding. And I just echo what everybody else said. It was great to be able to meet people in person, and just, boots on the ground is always a great thing. So it was very helpful for me. I really appreciate the work that you put into it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let's go with Pat Dorsey. Pat, can you hear us? Let's go on to Councilmember White Skunk.
Hey, good morning. About the tour and the whole presentation, I got a cold from being out in the rain in Fort Collins. That's what I take away from there. But the overall scheduling, planning, the topics, and the discussion in the firehouse, as well as at the county house, was really good. I really enjoyed. I learned a lot, and it was good to see everyone. And I appreciate the hospitality and the meeting, how it went. It was really good. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's see, Katie McGrath. Yep, Katie.
Yeah, I second everything that everyone has said so far. I thought the tour was great. That was probably my favorite part of the day, just to get to see some forestry work in action. And I thought it was really informative. And I really appreciated the focus on collaboration and the Big Thompson Watershed Health Partnership. I thought that was really great. And then I'll also just share, yesterday I hosted a peer learning session with several collaboratives from across the state. And I gave a super, super fast summary of what we all talked about last week. And then I solicited direct feedback from them. And so I have some things to share. I'll just share one thing right now, but then I'm also planning to share a written summary pretty soon. But the one thing that they really emphasize, I know in the Big Thompson tour, they said, we really want to see the Wildfire Ready Watersheds program extended. And the people I talked to yesterday emphasized that in general, if we have any role in making just consistent funding, it doesn't even need to be new, exciting, shiny new funding sources, but if we have a role in making funding consistent so that they know that the programs they're building can continue beyond these big bursts. I heard that as a loud and clear yesterday. So yeah, as far as the meeting last week, I thought it was great, and thanks for everybody who played a role in that.
Okay, who have I missed? Let's try Pat Dorsey again. And who else have I missed? Okay, well then I'll just add, it was fantastic. I appreciate everyone coming. I have to say I was pretty proud to see most of the people in person were from our legislative committee. I appreciate everyone and people that were participating. There were a lot of great people there, but I feel it was really awesome to have that feedback and to have those conversations. And I hope I'm really glad to hear you guys felt it was worth your while. And I need to get back to all the partners. Of course, I wish it hadn't rained so you guys could see some more things. But I'm sure we'll have other opportunities, and just super excited that we had some great conversations at the brewery. For those that didn't come, we had a great conversation with that landowner and how water affects her business because the quality of water for her brewery. And the Coalition for Pruitt Watershed is very thrilled with the opportunity to talk with all of us and share some of their work. I happen to have another kind of bringing people together from that tour, including our emergency services folks. And we talked about having a website. We're going to look at maybe creating a website so that all the partners in the watershed can track who's doing what, and we can click on a parcel of land, see who's working on it, who's doing wildfire mitigation, when it was done, what was done, and then people have that information and how we would house that for the partners. So that's something that has sprung out for us as a county that we're going to work on. So I don't know if that is interest of you. We have already done that with some of our things with like short-term rentals and oil and gas rigs you can click on the map. And also we're going to do that with water providers and watersheds. And we have that up with our countywide water plan. And I feel like all that information and data, even like with Codex and stuff, and maybe even this vapor pressure deficit, maybe we make a map there. I don't know, but it's just, I think that all comes together for making informed decisions. So I just want to thank you all for your participation. Yeah, you're right. It's an all lands database. And so this is something that we're going to do our specific for Lamar County, but I'm sure it will overlap. And I'm also serving on the Leveraging Resources Committee. And so I know that's some work that they're doing. So thank you. Okay, so let's move on our agenda. And I think that's great feedback from also for Courtney and DNR for what we have, things we want to do. I'm going to try to see if I can share my screen. I was fortunate to, well, I guess I don't have it. I'll show it next time. I'm if I can find it. For pictures from the bill signings, we went up the Friday after the Forest Health Council. We were up in Morrison, and we, let's see if I can find it. Sorry. We were up there with Jefferson County. It was actually flooding in that canyon too. As we drove up, I had to drive through some roads that were covered in water, but which I shouldn't have done, but that was the only way to get up there. I know, not a good idea. And so Jefferson County, Senator Cutter, Senator Story, Representative Velasco, the governor, Director Gibbs, and I'm going to not get his title right, but from the fire, DFS, Department of Fire Safety, Mr. Moore, is it Mr. Moore, right? Morgan, that's right. And he was there. So we have Senate Bill 5 has been signed on Friday. And then on Monday, as you saw, you all got invited, Christy Burry, and I think Katie, you were there as well. And Director Combs and I, and my colleagues were up in the forest nursery, and the governor came and took a quick tour. And so Senate Bill or House Bill 1060 for the nursery bill was signed as well. So both our bills are signed and done. So though we didn't have much to do with it's one that went to Wildfire Interventions Committee. The Forest Health Council endorsed that bill, but Senate Bill is kind of out of our legislative council. So I think we can kind of, give ourselves high fives that we hope what we got and what we hoped we got done. So now that's why these conversations today and the next couple of weeks, we're going to have pretty intense and maybe even go longer meetings like today to get our next priorities and things we want to pass on to our next priorities to the council and to hopefully the Wildfire Interim Committee and others. So I'll probably bring photos, or maybe I'll have Courtney just send those out for photos so you guys can see that. The nursery did a great job. Director McCombs and staff did a great job. So we have a lot of great discussions today, and there was a great question, Katie. I had the same question. How are we going to do this with legislation, whether it's a study or how is that going to look, and how should we address some of these new things with the vapor pressure deficit? We'll try to get that video from the wildfire conference. I'll look for, we'll all try to look for it because it was a pretty fantastic presentation. So the next meeting, we had some other priorities for us, and I'm trying to look for that because that was in my presentation to the Forest Health Council. What are your burning desires to have at our next meeting? Because I feel like in the next couple of weeks, we have to kind of formalize some suggestions. But right now we need to have guests. So Courtney, go ahead so we can learn more and kind of explore these topics.
I just wanted to let you all know that Angela and I looked at the calendar and we sort of made a little timeline that we thought this committee would need to follow in order to have the full council officially vote on recommendations to move to the Wildfire Matters Interim Committee. So I just wanted to share that because yeah, it's pretty tight. So I'm just going to share, I'm going to share my screen and I'll also just walk you through it really quick. It'll only take 1 second. So essentially the July 27th meeting is when the full council will need to vote. And then Angela and I were thinking it would be nice to get the recommendations to the council to review and think about 10 days ahead of time. So that's July 17th. So if this committee could solidify the recommendations that it would like to present to the council by July 14th, we thought that was best. And so that leaves 4 meetings, including this one, before July 14th. So it's, yeah, May 19th today, and then 3 meetings in June. This June meeting is the weekend before 4th of July. So we didn't know if you wanted to perhaps move that meeting, likely still have it, but move it. So we just wanted to show you, yeah, how many more meetings you have before you need to be making those prioritization decisions.
And the other thing is the June 16th has been canceled because more than half of us won't be here.
Right. Okay.
And so, I'm open to us either doing extra homework or adding an extra, getting out of our cadence at least for the next month and a half. And we might need to, I don't know, I'm open to that. I just want to make sure that we're having the information and maybe experts to come talk to us, but we need to kind of, we got a lot of work to do. And that's why I was saying we might have some homework to read and think about. What are your thoughts? So I know someone raised their hand. Who raised their hand? Did anybody raise their hand? Oh, Julie.
I did, only because I saw the June 16th and I couldn't remember if Courtney knew that. I just would throw out there, I am happy to increase the cadence or add additional Friday mornings if that, is beneficial to the group to allow those discussions to happen, or start earlier, go a little later. I can be flexible.
But Courtney, as a staffing perspective, if we wanted, I know it's getting near Memorial Day and it's busy, but I feel like we're kind of fresh in our minds. I would suggest even meeting next Friday, even if it's, again, just for the 45 minutes. I feel like we have to get something, some other ideas and topics. So, Mr. Morgan.
I can also be flexible. I don't mind the homework, but one thing I see, the possible topic, it's a common thread. So many of the things that we discuss right now, biochar and biomass, and many of the things that I guess I track, a presentation or additional information on how much material we want to leave on the ground. Currently, many of our management programs and many of the things that I participate in are pretty much total removal projects. And I question whether we always need total removal to meet our fuels objectives for forest health. And so I think I would suggest that as a topic for discussion, because that greatly increases the cost of these projects, which reduces the number of acres that you can manage. And so I think there's some opportunity there to do additional acres for less money and have a greater impact. And we tend to do projects and make them look like a park, and everybody's happy with that, but it's oftentimes not cost effective. So that would be my suggestion for a topic that we might want to explore.
That was what was going to be my suggestion after I heard from all of you, was just we need to talk about the piles and the woody biomass and this biochar thing. And I know there's plenty of people we can get, but Christy, your hand is raised. Do you have some things you'd like to talk about, or you agree?
Yeah, I agree. And thank you. Also, we talked at one of our previous committee meetings about controlled burns and how difficult it is in the state of Colorado, and particularly because of insurance, and wondering if that's something that we might want to touch on also.
So I think that's a topic, yes, we want to talk about. I think that's going to be a big, heavy lift. So I think we're going to need to have the big, heavy lifts and these small ones. But I think this already, one that I wanted besides biochar and these other ones we talked about, is this wildfire ready watersheds grants. We've heard from several that they're ready to go, but the funding or the deadline is, I think it was 2025. And so I don't know, Courtney was looking at, is that something that DNR can change those deadlines, or if that's a legislative thing? That might be a quick, easy lift to address. So how about this? My suggestion, so we can get, because we're way over time, is next meeting, can we talk about the ease, that one I think is easy to kind of help, because we heard that from lots of folks, is, and if I got this wrong, the Fire Ready Watershed grant or program, the deadlines, if we can have some questions answered on that, about the deadline or how that looks.
Yeah, Jody, I can even explore before the meeting,
Okay.
you know, perhaps that's even just a department sort of conversation that doesn't need to go through council or
so
legislation. So I can flag that.
I think that'd be a great one, just to, if that's an easy, low hanging fruit, let's take care of that one. And then let's talk about woody mass biomass. And then let's have the insurance question after that. Is everyone okay meeting next Friday and seeing what kind of, it's going to be a holiday weekend, but maybe we can pull together at least one speaker, and maybe Courtney and I can look at some, because there is a study right now that passed, Senator Cutter did on, I think it passed. We'd have to check with Daphne. It's the one with the biochar for plugging oil and gas abandoned wells. And so, so maybe we just know what that, how that went, and how that might overlap, because we don't want to, repeat the wheel of that. But if that is some interesting study or information. So, so my first question is, everybody ready to meet next Friday? If we promise we'll be done definitely by 9:30. Okay. Secondly, do we have to have a vote, Courtney? We don't have to vote to change our schedule, right? We can just move the meeting.
I think we can just schedule another
Okay.
meeting. No need to vote.
And those two topics for next meeting, and then some homework to send your way to do some reading. Yeah. Okay. So with that, we at least have our next maybe 2 or 3 meetings, but really be thinking, which is a lot of, we got a lot of ground to cover, and we don't have 616. So let's, you guys already do this, but you're prepared and ready to go. So with that, and then I'll work with Courtney on finalizing that agenda and bringing appropriate people to talk about these topics. And I might bring, there's a lot of emerging technologies right now. So I'll see if I can bring one of those experts in too. So let's settle that for the next meeting. Does that sound, anyone have an issue or concern with that? Let's put it that way. Okay. Well, with that, thank you all for all your engagement, and thanks for now you know why I wanted to talk about vapor pressure deficit. Which kind of makes like, oh, wow, this is not good. So let's, and we might end up bringing that back as another second bite of the apple to just further that conversation too. So, all right, with that, I'll take a motion at 9:34 to adjourn.
I so move.
There's a second.
Second.
Great. All those in favor, just say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Hi.
Anybody opposed? Great. Hey, everybody have a great weekend. Stay dry and we'll see you in a week. Thank you.